Hello, welcome to Croxley Common Moor, a local nature reserve and site of special scientific interest. Start with an aerial view. Along the southern boundary you have the Ebury Way walking and cycling route between Watford and Rickmansworth. Along the eastern boundary you have the Croxley Business Park. Along the western boundary you have the railway line, and along the northern boundary you have the River Gade. Couple of views. This is the main view from the Mill Lane entrance on the northern side, and this is the view from the Ebury Way entrance on the southern side. The site is 40 hectares or 99 acres. It's called Croxley Common Moor because historically it was common land. But what is common land? That takes us back to the Middle Ages, when the lord of the manor would allow the peasants to use the least fertile land for their private use for various purposes such as grazing their livestock, fishing or collecting fuel. Much common land was enclosed during the Great Enclosure period in the 18th and 19th century, but even today there remain 600,000 hectares of common land in England and Wales. Despite the name of common land, commons are not publicly owned. They all belong to somebody, and in our case Common Moor belongs to Three Rivers District Council. However, the Countryside and Rights of Way Act of 2000 allowed public access to all common land. After the Second World War, the amount of grazing by commoners on Common Moor gradually decreased and eventually ceased. And the inevitable result of that is a build-up of bushes and trees. That's the natural progression in most of England, and if you think of nearby commons on Chorleywood and Chipperfield, they are largely woodland now, whereas once they would have been much more open. Here is an aerial view in 1926. In the foreground you have the John Dickinson paper mill, which sat alongside the moor for 1.5 centuries, and in the background you've got Common Moor, and you can see it is largely free of bushes and trees. Whereas today there are significant amounts of scrub and even woodland. Here's just an example of a dense stand of blackthorn. Turning now to how the moor is managed. In 1986 the Common Moor was declared a site of special scientific interest, and this was specifically because of its rich diversity of wildflowers. It was not for wildlife in general. This is called a triple SI for short, and it's the only triple SI in the Three Rivers Council area. But to maintain that status it needs to be actively managed, otherwise, as I've said, it will gradually progress towards scrub and woodland. Trees are valuable, of course, as well, but woodland has far fewer wildflowers than grassland, and those that it does have appear briefly in the spring, generally before the trees have developed their foliage, which of course tends to shade out most wildflowers. And England has lost far more natural grassland since the Second World War than it has lost woodland. The aim of the management plan is not to eliminate scrub, but to limit it. So we want to limit it to 10% of the overall area and to 5% of those areas with the greatest plant richness. There are three partners in this management: Three Rivers Council as the landowner, the Countryside Management Service, which is part of Hertfordshire County Council, which advises on the management, and the Friends of Croxley Common Moor, which does much voluntary conservation work, although contractors are also used for bigger tasks. So what are the elements of this management? First of all, and most importantly, grazing. Cattle are brought onto the moor throughout the spring and summer, and their grazing will remove much of the coarse grass and smaller bush and tree seedlings. And then in the winter, volunteers cut scrub and mainly burn it on site. They do not do this during the spring and summer. They want to avoid the bird nesting season for obvious reasons. A before and after picture. that's one area at the beginning of a scrub clearance season, and that's the same area at the end of that season. Another management task is removing ragwort. Ragwort is a plant that's first of all poisonous to cattle and horses, and also tends to become over dominant. In this picture you see Councillor Chris Lloyd, a Three Rivers District Councillor, who at that time was the chairman of the council. You see his badge of office. He has been very supportive of the Friends, and you see the tool being used. It's a tool specially designed for lifting out ragwort plants by their roots. It's called a lazy dog. Here's a close-up of a ragwort plant. You may see the caterpillars on it. Those are the caterpillars of the cinnabar moth. Many butterflies and moths have very specific food plants, and ragwort is the food plant of the cinnabar moth caterpillar. And obviously when we see caterpillars on a plant, we leave it, we do not remove it. Another important management task is removing litter. Here's the results of one session's collecting, and unfortunately this became particularly necessary during 2020. The pandemic restrictions caused a surge in visitor numbers to the moor, which unfortunately was accompanied by a surge in the amount of litter. Moving on now to wildlife on the moor. As I've said, the wildflowers are the biggest distinction of the moor, and this amongst them is probably the single most important one. Petty whin. Whin is another name for gorse, so it really means like a small form of gorse. It is prickly, and it's really quite an unusual plant, and we have substantial amounts of it on the moor. Small mammals, obviously, plenty of rabbits around. Butterflies and moths. This is an elephant hawk moth. We had a mop trapping session in 2019 where experts in one night trapped and recorded 106 different moth species. Birds. This is the green woodpecker, which is really emblematic of the moor. It's attracted by the ants in the ant hills, many of which are still alive, which it eats. Bats. This is a nocturnal bat. We have a yearly bat recording session which always finds at least 3 species present. And finally, glowworms. Glowworm is a misnomer. It's actually a beetle, not a worm, and it's only the female that glows, and she only glows for a short period around July each year in order to attract a mate. So males will be flying overhead looking out for that telltale glow. So that's a brief summary. That's our website. If you want to know more about the moor and what events are taking place, you can find it all out there. You can also find our a link for emailing the Friends. If you're interested in any of our volunteer sessions, I should just say that if you're under 16, you would need to be accompanied by a responsible adult. So I hope that's been useful, and hope perhaps to see you on the moor in sometime in the future. Thank you.